Good evening, and welcome to the Veterans Leadership Council's signature event. My name is Alex Pinozzi, and I help run events for the VLC, and we are so thankful to have all of you here tonight. We've got an awesome program lined up. We've got an incredible panel talking about the big trends of 2018. We've got John Edelman here, who we're going to recognize later with our Veteran Supporter of the Year. And then we've got more beer and a little bit of food to come, so everybody can kind of interact a little bit more. I know that's important, right? We are so thrilled to have all of you here. This is a big step for the VLC, and to see so many exciting, interesting people from all sorts of different backgrounds is really an amazing thing for us. I think we're also really excited to see so many new faces. So for all the new faces out there, the VLC is Chicago's premier veteran networking group for professionals. We're a group that tries to create dynamic opportunities for individuals to engage and interact and connect with each other. I think our motto is we care about your service, we care about what you did for the country, and then we also care about the veteran voice. I think one thing that we all realize is that within your first few days of military training, no matter what branch of service, you very quickly realize that it's about team, it's about community, it's about taking care of each other. And so we try to bring those lessons to our post-military careers in the business community. So no matter if you are transitioning now, transitioned 2 or 20 or 30 years ago, it's about saying, hey, I've got your back and I know you've got mine too, in a professional sense. And so it's kind of with that spirit that we wanted to invite all of you here tonight for this signature event. And I'd be remiss if I did not mention that a few months ago, I was able to meet with Julie at Bank of America, and then Bill and Ryan over at McDonald's, and we were able to turn this vision into a reality. And they right away bought into the mission, got excited, and we are so thankful to have both of those organizations be our partners along the way, along this journey. Very simply put, if it were not for their early support, we wouldn't be here tonight. So I'd ask you to join me in thanking the teams at both Bank of America and McDonald's. And it was at those early meetings that we talked a little bit about our vision for tonight. And our vision really was obviously to provide great value add for all of you through programming, but also to bring the Chicago veteran community together and to celebrate the accomplishments that we've had over the last year, because there's been a lot of them. The Chicago veteran community brought the DoD Warrior Games for the first time that it wasn't at a military installation was in Chicago, and we by far crushed any attendance records. They had 20,000 people show up to support our wounded warriors at Soldier Field. Another major accomplishment, and almost equally so, has been the fight against veterans' homelessness. And since they've tracked the metrics for this, in the last year, we've seen more progress than in all of the previous years, nearly combined. And in part, that's due to a public-private partnership with our friends at All Chicago, and then also the city's Ending Veteran Homelessness Initiative, which we're very excited about. I know, and something that as a community we should all be very proud of, is part of that mission of taking care of one another. Another thing that, just when we talk about Chicago being an area for veterans, is we're actually one of 6 cities that has a dedicated Office of Veteran Affairs in City Hall. That's one of 6 nationwide, which is sort of incredible. That's led by Victor Lagrune, who's with us somewhere in the audience and is a big supporter of the VLC. And their team works tirelessly to support veterans and make sure that all veterans get the services that they need. At the state level, it's Erica Jeffries and the team at the Illinois Department of Veteran Affairs, and they've got an incredible amount of programs as well that they led. I think one other thing that really sets Chicago apart for veterans, and I know there's many different leaders from all the different nonprofits in the audience tonight, so I'll name a few. I can't name all of them just for time's sake, but I think that's one of the keys, right, is there's so many that I almost can't name them all. But of course, our great great partners at Bunker Labs working towards veteran entrepreneurship, Student Veterans of Illinois, the Tillman Foundation, Veterans in Education, Team RWB, Team Rubicon, veterans that serve their communities in different ways. It's really been an outstanding year. I think we're also really excited about the progress we've made at the VLC. So if you don't mind, I'll just take a moment to tell you about that. In the last year, we've grown our membership by over 40%. We're also hosting this signature event for the first time, and we hope and expect it to be an annual affair. We've also laid the groundwork where next year we're going to launch 2 new chapters, one in St. Louis and the other in Washington, D.C. And we've instituted a little bit different model that Kate, one of our co-presidents, will mention later tonight. So it has been a phenomenal year. There's been a lot of accomplishments, but I think that one thing that really tonight is about, and one reason we all like working with fellow veterans so much is because it's about what's the next challenge, what's on the horizon. And that's the theme for tonight. And so looking at the big ideas for next year in the business community and how it's going to impact all of our lives. So we're really excited. We've got a diverse panel with very deep insights from all different industries. And so without further ado, you've heard me talk enough. I'm going to ask our panel to come out and join us. Please help me welcome them. So while they're getting settled, I'm just going to take a moment to actually.
Actually, you want a seat too?
We didn't rehearse this, right?
We can do that.
We're already working well together.
We're all good. We're breaking the ice. We're laughing already, right? So, but while we're getting settled and figuring out the seats, I'm just going to take a moment to do brief introductions for all of these folks. So first is Anjan Astana, who is a senior partner at McKinsey. He leads McKinsey's electrical energy and natural gas product in both North and South America. He's active in the Chicago community. He's actually a board member here at the Goodman Theater, which was great as we were planning. It got all the event staff on board really quickly. So he is a graduate. He got his MBA from Wharton at the University of Pennsylvania. Before that, Buckeyes. Got a master's in science and engineering from the Ohio State University, which unfortunately beat my Badgers last weekend, so I was bummed about.
Although we didn't make the playoffs.
Yeah, brutal. We're in Big Ten country, so I guess it's a favorable crowd for that, so I'm with you. And then graduated from the prestigious India Institute of Technology before that. He is an expert in what boards and what CEOs care about right now for Fortune 100 companies, and really everything energy. Next is David Hiller, who is the CEO of the McCormick Foundation, which, if you didn't know, actually kind of has veterans at its roots in the form of Colonel Robert R. McCormick, who was a citizen soldier and was the founder of the McCormick Foundation. Prior to leading the McCormick Foundation, he was the CEO and publisher for both the LA Times and for the Chicago Tribune here in the city. He's very active in the community on all sorts of boards. This is another one. List is too long for me to say up here, but the Field Museum, the Chicago History Museum, the Illinois Holocaust Museum, Roosevelt University, and a few others. I think one that's particularly exciting for me is he chairs the Commercial Club of Chicago's Veteran Hiring Working Group, which is something that we'll probably talk a little bit more about tonight. He's a graduate of Harvard Law School and Harvard College. He's an expert in philanthropy, press, and everything Chicago.
We'll see.
Next is Rita Cook, who is the managing director for the Global Commercial Bank at Bank of America for the Midwest Middle Market. Before she was in that role, she was actually the COO for the Global Commercial Bank. She's also the proud spouse of a Navy SEAL who's with us and is a member of the VLC. So she's always been a big supporter of veterans. She chairs the Council of Diversity and Inclusion at the bank. And we're really excited for her because last week she got named to Crane's top 20 women bankers in all the cities. So that was a big deal, and we're very happy for her.
20 under 20.
I wish.
She also sits on the board with David of the Chicago History Museum. She's a graduate of Governors State University. She's an expert in banking and in the middle market and what firms need in the Midwest. So thank you. Next is Donna Steele-Ponder, who is a Senior Director of Business Systems at McDonald's. She leads up their business solutions team in the Midwest. I think we're really excited and well-positioned for a lot of things we want to talk about tonight. She was vital in their strategy at McDonald's Breakthrough 2020. She's also was on their employee advisory committee and a leader on that in order of how McDonald's thinks about their move from the suburbs downtown here. And so we're excited to have her. She is a graduate of Syracuse University, an expert in automation and information technology, a space she's worked in for 30 years. And then finally is Peter Wilkins. So Peter is he is the managing director of Hyde Park Angels, which is one of the largest, probably the most active in the whole U.S. In angel investment networks. Before that, he founded and led an education organization called New Fortuno, which was geared toward the Hispanic community. Before that, he was the president of Primedia Healthcare, which was a KKR-backed company. And then he also held senior roles in 2 technology startups that exited for a combined $2.8 billion, pretty phenomenal. He's an advisor to the World Business Council here in Chicago, and then he's a graduate of the Chicago Booth Executive Institute and another Big Ten guy, Indiana University. He's an expert in innovation, venture capital, and really just all things entrepreneurship. And the last thing that I want to mention, because it is Pearl Harbor Day, so this is one thing we're particularly excited about. But Pete is the proud son of a World War II Navy veteran that actually served in the Pacific Theater. So I think that's kind of a terrific tie-in to the panel tonight. So anyways, happy to have all you.
Thank you very much.
So we've heard me talk a bunch, so I'm going to try to stop as quick as possible, but I want to set it up for David a little bit here. As a lot of us came to hear about Chicago, and David, you're very active, obviously, as a civic leader in the community, as we just heard. I was every day, it seems like we're hearing something. Amazon headquarters, maybe. There's cranes all over the city. Stuff is going up. I'd wonder if you could tell me a little bit more about why you think Chicago is so well positioned going forward. But then, so it's not just a total softball. If you could also maybe tell me a little bit about some areas that you think the city could improve on.
Great, thank you. Love to. First, thanks so much for bringing us all here. Thanks to the Veterans Leadership Council. It's an amazing group, great concept. One of the things as part of the answer is that makes Chicago great is the civic infrastructure, the way people come together and are committed to common purpose and do things, and a lot of it's driven in the veteran community. First, I also have to tell you, I don't remember the last time anybody did 5 introductions from memory as
After having done 7 minutes of talking.
Yeah. No wonder McKinsey hired him. Oh my gosh. I thought you guys all use PowerPoints. And, the second thing I'd say is I have to apologize. I have the worst shoes of the whole group.
No.
Yes, but I walk to work, so that's what I walk to work every day. So Chicago, it is, what an amazing place, and to list the assets and the things that bring us all here and bring other opportunities and people here is remarkable. I won't start the list with winter weather because that is actually, I find and am told in the recruiting area as we're trying to bring other great people in from other areas. All of you who do a lot of recruiting know this too. That can be a tougher part of the sell. But before you get to that, and hopefully you do most of your recruiting in the better weather, people aren't here, is the, it starts with the people. I was born and raised in the Chicagoland area and have lived not so many other places, but a fair number of other places, and just the quality and the genuineness of people in the Chicago area, I think is a bedrock strength. And then you go beyond that and look at, well, what are their actual talents and experiences? And we should get Mayor Emanuel up here because he rattles the things off. But you know, the extraordinary depth of education that we have. I think it's the most highly educated in terms of post-secondary degrees of any large city, and the institutions that make that possible. Somebody once on some other panel I was listening to made the statement that I think was a great one. He said, if you want to have a great city, start a great university and wait 60 years. Think about it, that's kind of true. And I think it was a U of C guy, actually, from where you go, right? But those are among, of course, the core anchor institutions. And Chicago is so amazingly blessed in the secondary with, you know, all the, I won't start to name them because we got so many of them, really fine institutions from, you know, large research-based institutions that then can become the hubs for the innovation and invention and things, all the way through with to the city colleges that reach out and engage, you know, very large numbers of young people in the community. So those would be among the top things. You know, we're going through, and along with about 1,000 other people, I'm on one of these committees to try to bring what is it called, HQ2,
Yep.
the Amazon headquarters, and we put a giant. Some of you guys may even have been involved in that work, likely. With the raft of advantages that Chicago has, it's a really strong case. But then, as you said, the tougher part of it is to think about what are some of the things that we need to work on, and a few of them come to mind. One is that in too many ways, Chicago's a story of two different cities. We've got the glorious downtown and the lakeshore and things, and then not at all far away geographically, but in a lot of ways, way too far away. You got our communities on the south and west side that have long been racially segregated, a lot of it by deliberate acts of discrimination over decades, and who haven't had the same opportunity at the dreams of, you know, things we see downtown as a lot of the rest of us have had. So I know there's a lot of attention to that, and it should be. I know I'm currently not in the for-profit business world. I'm in the foundation world, and there are a lot of people, both foundations and public agencies and for-profit companies, but on so many different levels, doing the right thing in restoring the opportunity in our communities on the south and west side, jobs, public safety, quality schools will help all of us, but most of all, it'll be doing the right thing for the people that are our neighbors in those communities. The other thing, and I think it's an issue with our bid with Amazon, is we really got to do a better job fixing the fiscal state and political state of the state. The fact that we're near, on some, you know, we've got bad budget problems and credit ratings at almost every level of government is a real challenge. And the thing related to that, or maybe produced that, is our system of government on many different levels that doesn't function well. And, you know, if we fix those things, 2 things, 3 things, we'll be near perfect, and everybody will want to come here. So that's a few
No, that's
thoughts
great.
anyway.
And the weather, which is hard to
And the
fix.
And the weather, yeah. I'll work on the
the
weather.
positive side of global warming, Chicago might warm up, which
Yeah.
Yeah.
they solve that
Yeah.
problem.
Good.
So I'm gonna bounce it back down to Donna, and you are in a for-profit business, and you just were in the decision to move to, headquarters could have moved everywhere, couldn't have stayed in the suburbs. They made the decision to move down to the city. Could you talk a little bit about the calculus behind that decision and what led to that and what excites you guys?
Sure. First of all, thank you for having us and inviting me. This is actually my first panel discussion, so it's very exciting for me.
You're doing great.
What's behind our decision? So I think David mentioned a lot of it. There's just a lot of, we were talking about it in the back room, there's a lot of vibrancy and energy in the city. And McDonald's is in a point in its life, its 60-some-year-old life, where we are still, we're trying to reinvent ourselves. And so we got new leadership a few years ago. And what we're experiencing is a cultural change, right? It's not just that you change the leadership, but we're trying to be more relevant. And what that sometimes requires is that we make big change, right? So we've been in Oak Brook for quite a while in our own little McDonald's bubble, which is kind of really cool, though. So I'm going to miss that part of it. But the part that we're going to take advantage of is really being able to bring our teams together in a single location, thereby increasing the level of collaboration. We're today spread out across 3 different buildings in Oak Brook. And being in a single building will help us be able to just have a more organic type of collaboration, as well as the networking and collaboration that you get from those around you, right? I mean, there's Google in that area. There's a lot of different businesses that are coming up in that area. So it's a great opportunity for us to learn from our neighbors and to collaborate with them and bring them into our environment, go visit their environment. So what we can create, we still don't know, but I mean, it's just awesome potential when you start to bring that kind of energy together. But the talent part of it, right? Now we're in a space that's a lot more appealing to young talent, right? And we're in the midst of, we're quite in the middle of all the colleges and universities, and getting the millennials to want to come out to the suburbs is not quite as exciting as having, the high, vibrant energy of the city. So we think we're in a great position to be able to leverage a lot of what David talked about in terms of the talent pool that's here. So that's
Great.
incredibly exciting.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Thanks. So I'm going to zoom us out for a second, and let's talk about trends a little bit, and maybe we'll work big to small. I know, Anjan, when we initially talked, one of the reasons I was so excited to have you on the panel is because I've personally seen, right, you're flying around, going in and out of meetings with CEOs of Fortune 100s every day, advising board members. Can you just tell us a little bit about how, what are the things they're asking for counsel on? How are you advising them? How are they thinking through? What's top of mind?
Terrific. I only came to this panel because Alex said he won't accept his offer at McKinsey if I didn't make it. No, I'm kidding. I'm really delighted to be here. Thanks for having me. It's a terrific organization. Look, as CEOs, boards, I know a number of you interact with companies. I think it's a tough time. It's both tough and exciting to be a CEO or a board member these days. But the 2 or 3 things I just will highlight. One is it's amazing how much of a difference technology is making. It doesn't matter what type of company you are. You don't have to be an Apple or a Google or an Amazon or a Facebook. You could be an energy company, a chemical company, a media company, a high-tech player. technology is making a huge difference. And one of the pieces we are starting to, within McKinsey, within the universities we go to, and you start to see people are starting to say, look, a CEO in 5, 10, 15 years from now will likely have to have had a technology, some sort of a technology stint. They don't have to be the main technology brain, but I think, so as we reflect on our own folks like Alex and others who are joining us, we're not, McKinsey traditionally has not been a technology-oriented company, but we're starting to realize how important being able to understand technology and its power of disruption in these industries, that we cannot counsel CEOs or boards unless we appreciate the power of technology. There's a lot of buzzwords going on around big data and analytics and digital and cloud, and you know, frankly, for me, I'm not a technology person, it starts to make your head hurt. Like you start thinking about all of this and say, what could all this do? So it is, and I think for CEOs and boards who frankly haven't grown up in these environments, and they probably have 5, 7, 8 years left to shepherd their companies, I think it makes a lot of their heads hurt too. And they're not very good at it. So I think one of the things that a lot of CEOs and boards are thinking about is both the upside of technology and also some of the risks of technology, as you guys all hear about cybersecurity and hacking and what else that could do. So that's one of the big things out there, no surprise to anyone, but the only point I wanted to make is the discomfort boards and CEOs have with this is remarkable to see. Behind closed doors, there's a lot of just folks are not comfortable with what that might do to them. Is it a risk? Is it an opportunity? How do we deal with it? So that's one. And the only other maybe broad theme I would highlight is I think the world is getting to be a very complex place in addition to technology. So everything going on with geopolitics and the dynamics of with China and Russia and Europe and what's going on in Africa, and you start to do the equations in your head of, is this ultimately good for us? Or if Europe ends up going a certain direction and China ends up going a certain different direction, what is the net impact on my enterprise, my US business, my European business, my Chinese business? I think that has gotten very complicated. And being able to understand the geopolitical, I almost call it the geopolitical equation and the balancing of the variables is also very complex. So I think that's the other, you take technology and you take the geopolitical forces at work and you try to put it together and say, what's the net impact for us? And should we be playing defense? Should we be playing offense? And I think so it's a tough job, being a CEO. So I'll stop there.
Yeah.
We can take questions later.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Rita, I'm going to hand it over to you. Can you bring it a little closer to home to us? So you obviously run things in the Midwest. You're working with firms every day. How middle market especially? How about for them? What are they coming to you for on a lending perspective?
Yeah, it's interesting. We didn't meet before today, but all of our stories weave together, which is probably a good thing. It means we know what we're talking about, I think. But no, it's interesting. So I have been in banking for 20 years. I've seen various cycles. But I have to tell you, confidence around middle market companies, so clients between 50 million or 2 billion, or if you look at business banking, clients that start at 5 million to 50 million, confidence is at an all-time high right now since the recession. And while I have anecdotal feedback, I talk to C-suite leaders across the Midwest or the cold and snowy states, given today, or the Big Ten states, however you want to look at it. I actually reached out to our analyst team and just asked them, and I did write a few statistics down in case anyone quotes me. I once heard 70% of statistics are made up on the fly. I've got facts here. So with that, starting at a global level, if you think back during this last recession and you look where the growth was in jobs, it came out of middle market companies. They were the ones investing. They were the ones recruiting. Instead of pulling back, they were trying to figure out how to invest their capital. So we've been tracking over the past several years their confidence from a global, a nationwide, and a local. And at a global level, it went from 3 years ago to a 56% confidence to a 70% to this past quarter, 74%. So despite some of the geopolitical, they do feel from a global lens, especially based here in the US with it called a 2.5% GDP, that there is opportunity outside of the US borders, specifically in areas where you have emerging markets. So they're figuring out how do they invest there. They feel even better when they think of a national level, despite some of politics. And the next comment, I'm just saying I'm not trying to get into politics, but there was a Trump bump and then a Trump slump. And now I think things are neutralizing for them. But if you look across the nation, they went from 71% confidence as a nation to 84% last year to 83% this year. So it's been relatively the same. Locally, they feel really good. So you usually are more confident about what you know. And 3 years ago, there was an 80% confidence rating. Last year, 87%, 88%. And I bring that up because when I think of trends in confidence, 70% of CEOs were polled in the middle market space, those that had answered actually. And it's the first time where only 30% said they were still going to hold their cash. And that 30% that were going to hold were for future investments. They were thinking about the right ways to invest. But the 70% that said they were going to spend cash, now mind you, they're sitting on stockpiles of cash. I was in liquidity 10 years ago when we had liquidity flooding into the bank. Of that 70%, 20% of that is going to be spent on infrastructure, data, fraud. If you think about the institution I work at, Bank of America, one of my sponsors and mentors, Kathy Besant, just named #1 woman in banking, actually runs a technology firm. If you add together Google, Facebook, Amazon, think about the infrastructure some of the financial services are investing in. It's the same place companies are investing in. The next areas, once again, wanted to make sure I had my statistics right. So technology is #1. #2 at 15% is a cross between plants and equipment, and then HR, training and development. I know we're going to talk later about talent, but it's interesting, recruiting the right talent and retaining that talent, especially where not everyone sticks around for 20 years like I have at my firm, right? Millennials want to move around more. How do you not only recruit that talent, but invest in that talent? And the next areas are 10% are looking at acquisitions, 8% into new facilities. Similar to McDonald's, we're actually consolidating in one place in Chicago to really change our environment and for more collaboration. And then 7% are looking at new ways to be innovative. So the research and development is flipped into the technology space. So I would say I am bullish. I've actually seen loan growth across the industry grow about 1% more than GDP. And I think that's because the C-suite is confident, despite some of the political noise we hear around the globe. And they think there's more opportunity, and they don't see it as a threat.
Great, thank you. So Pete, we've heard a lot already tonight about technology and the disruption, and that's where we're going to move kind of with our next topic. But from the startup perspective, as an early stage investor, where are the startup teams? Where are they running hard after right now? What's getting traction in your world?
You know, I wanted to just say one thing before I answer the question. Yep. It's a true honor to be here today, and there's not many times that my father is brought up or presented before I speak. And it is an honor. My father taught me so many great things, and it was because of the time and the value that he put into serving America. He fought in World War II, and it is a true honor to be here today. So thank you for that, and it kind of hit me and struck a nerve that certainly I have a great respect for my father. So I think that when you're looking at innovation, the unique thing about where we start, we're the most active early stage investors in Chicago, and there's a unique opportunity in Chicago where I think that we have an arbitrage play. Our overall valuations of how we invest are more affordable. The cost of business is lower. This is all data proven. And our investments usually pan out better than San Francisco, New York, Austin, or the Pacific Northwest. I think one of the fundamental things you see is not only are costs lower, but the concentration of employees staying within their companies is much greater than high turnover, which has a big impact to all your businesses. I think that becomes kind of going to a point that you brought up earlier, becomes really critical on how Chicago performs. But if I look at startup investing and things that are trending, I think some of the biggest trends, I think that machine learning is something that most people in Chicago don't have full appreciation for what artificial intelligence and machine learning will do to transform businesses. I think that it's ultimately going to actually probably impact a lot more middle-class workers than it's going to impact restaurant workers and factory workers. There's a lot of data. So you see a lot of artificial machine learning as a place we look, and I think it's also a responsibility of all civic and business and investors to think about the impact. I think the second area that I think is a little bit zealous, and there's a lot of froth around it, is cryptocurrency. However, like the internet, when people say, well, the internet's not going to work, I think cryptocurrency and creating and the advantages it brings is something that we are really paying attention to as being a major trend that we're investing behind. And I think that the third area, which is betterment and convenience, I think there's enormous trends that we're investing behind of. We want what we want when we want it, and we want it to be better for us in most trends. So healthier foods, simpler foods, prepared for us when we get home, on our kitchen counters, knowing exactly when we're going to get home. So you see technology where Amazon can now come into your house, and you have Home Chef and all these different. And I think that the trends in food, as you're probably very aware of, is that there's trends just like technology, that it's easier to get good food from farm to table than ever before, which is disrupting the market. And so we look at investments around those. So those are three. I could probably speak on a few others, but I think that those are big trends that we're investing behind and we're looking at closely.
I am going to add on to that, though. What's interesting about that is one thing I do see when I go out and talk to these C-suite executives about where they're investing. It's no longer about what they're going to build for a client and build it and they will come. Their strategy is all focused on client experience, simplifying and improving. And so they've really turned it as, in leveraging data, what does the client need and how can I meet that need? When you think about it, everyone's got all this big data. We were talking about this in the audience earlier when I was out networking. Everyone's got data, but it's like a race to the moon. Who's going to get there first? How are you going to decode that? And I think that's actually a really positive trend because it goes back to environmental, social, and governance, and what you were talking about, civic responsibility. And it's no longer focused on big companies. We are, several of us, part of for-profit large companies, but it's really consumer-focused, I think more so now than ever.
Yep.
In a positive way. Maybe it's because of the transparency and information.
That's great. So this keyed me up perfectly, and I'm going to ask you to dig into a little bit more, Pete, on the automation and AI front in a second. But Donna, so talking about the customer experience, how to make it better, automation. That's obviously what you do at McDonald's. How are you guys thinking about the in-store kiosk, and how are we going to feel that change?
Yeah, this is an incredibly exciting period for us at McDonald's. 2017 has been the year of technology at McDonald's. I think we recognized a couple years ago that we were kind of behind the 8 ball with regard to where we were in the digital space. And so we went in. I mean, talk about the investment. We made incredible investments in building out our digital environment and investing in trying to understand what is it our customer wants for us. How do we serve our customer the way they want to be served? How do we allow them to order the way that they want to order and provide that convenience? Another recent addition to that really is not just our external customers, right? So we've got the mobile order and pay that customers can use, our mobile offers. We've got kiosks going into our restaurants. Next year, you're going to see, restaurants just looking beautiful with all this beautiful technology in it so that you can order your way. But we're also starting to look at what do we need to do for the employees that service our customers, right? How do we make their lives easier? So we've got a big initiative to try and make sure we're leveraging technology to simplify the way that they work as well. So we are all in on technology and making sure that we're focused on all of our customers, right? I mean, our internal and our external customers. It's just incredibly exciting. And I used to wonder when I came to McDonald's 22 years ago, like, why does it take all this just to make a hamburger? And over the 22 years, it's just gotten bigger and more grand in terms of the things that we do. So,
No, that's great.
Yeah.
Thank you. So Pete, I want to kind of go back to you for a moment because you just mentioned, and I know you guys have a few portfolio companies, right? Catalytic, Motion AI, which actually just was acquired by HubSpot.
That's good.
That are
Our
in,
game, that's good.
Yep, that are in,
It was acquired successfully.
successfully
Really good,
acquired.
too.
Yeah, really good. So, but, you mentioned that this is going to disrupt jobs in industries that we might maybe not anticipate. Can you just expand on that a little bit?
I think that a couple of things. I think that if you look at where huge investment is being made by Google and Facebook, IBM, et cetera, and the advancements once you dig in and you look at what they're capable of doing, it is machine learning and the ability to solve problems using technology is like the human mind is actually working with that machine. And it's hard to kind of get your head around, but it's ultimately what it's doing is looking for patterns, recognizing patterns, and then predicting those patterns. And like many of you that use Waze, for example, as you go from point A to point B, it's amazing if you take a route that you haven't have ever, or that you're used to going home every day, and you're like, I know all 5 ways to get home. If there's traffic here, I'll go there. And you do that, you hit Waze, and you're like, there's no way that they're right. I'm not going that way. But all of a sudden, you figure out that Waze was right. You have actually tested, A/B tested yourself, that technology is. And so you start taking out human factoring that there's a lot of data that will show that there is a lot of inefficiency and emotion and all of that will start to be replaced. And if you look at the patternistic of how people operate in their jobs and how they're operating in their work, in their homes and so forth, that can be automated, and the technology now is in place that's being done. So you're going to see, and I think that it will start on the edges. So for Catalytic, for example, is one of our portfolio companies. What they do is big companies have software systems called ERP. To change anything in an ERP system costs a lot of money, and it takes a lot of IT folks to figure it out. It's like 20 people to screw a light bulb in type of scenario to do one simple change. And what Catalytic does using artificial intelligence is they can plug into their software, figure out a really mundane task. So this is simple stuff, but just responding to customers that are no longer are at the right address. But all of that has been completely automated in this huge system, and it's done in less than 5 days. So if you look, and so people aren't, the transformation is starting there. If you look at autonomous cars and other type of vehicles, you're seeing it put into place in every industry that you know. Just one final comment, like if you look at a company in Chicago that recently received a lot of funding called Tempus, they're using big data ultimately, and right now it's amazing how simple some of the stuff is. You're like, really, this company's worth $800 million and they're just doing this? Because you would say, why haven't we done that before? But they're solving the problem first, and then they're applying, they're going to apply, just like Watson's doing right now, machine learning to solve problems that are being done at such a rapid pace that there will be innovation in healthcare and so forth. So, hopefully I did a fairly decent job articulating a few points that might be relevant to the folks in the audience.
There's also another big place where there's a lot of machine learning going, that's in the fraud management, right? Because that data is huge. When you see transactions, coming from all over, the world, all over the the US, it's nearly impossible to be able to trace the patterns that you see in that data. So it's incredible what's going on in that space in terms of being able to capture patterns and shut down bad actors and that type of thing. So it's actually really enabling us. And when you start to move into spaces where you're making revenue in the cloud, it becomes critical that you manage your risk. And part of managing that risk is having something that can help protect your profits through that process. So
Absolutely. I feel like every day you hear, some big fraud scam that's going on and is impacting all of our lives, right?
Oh, absolutely.
I think, one other thing that we seem to hear in the news every day is Elon Musk. And so, Anjad, I'm going to transition to you here, and just on the theme of disruption. So, it really does. Seems like every day I read a new announcement, whether it's solar roofs or electric trucks or his gigawatt factory and all the batteries and how that's going to solar and batteries and how that's going to impact the grid. Could you just tell us a little bit about the change that's going on in energy and how you're thinking about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's an exciting time, right, to be in the power space or the energy space. It used to be at McKinsey, we would try to staff folks to different industries, and people would never want to work in the boring old utility space. They would be like, "Oh, can I go work in high tech?" And it was a tough time getting people to come to work in the utility or the power space. And as you read about things going on, but the thing I would say is what's interesting after, when you look at what has happened to the power mix and the supply mix in the U.S. People talk about solar, you talk about wind, you talk about batteries. Yeah. The biggest disruptor in the power space has been shale gas. And shale gas was something, it was a new technology to find more gas, natural gas in the ground than we had ever thought existed. And that has destroyed the economics for a lot of traditional plants. Yep. And when people think about, President Trump and the new EPA, and maybe they're going to roll back the Clean Power Plan. The fact of the matter is a lot of our clients, a lot of the utility players, they're kind of indifferent to what's going on in policy space because they're following economics. And I think the economics of some of the more traditional sources of generation have really gotten brutalized by shale gas, frankly, more than renewables. And so, but as you look ahead, speaking of Elon Musk, funny story, they had Elon Musk come and headline one of the utility conferences where they had and he almost got booed off the stage because he was so bold with his statements. But the innovation in batteries, the innovation in solar, the innovation in wind, I would say we're kind of in batteries, we're in the first or second inning. I think solar, we're in the third inning, maybe third or fourth inning. Wind maybe a little bit further. I think these technologies, I was just with a company this morning, and you look at the cost curves that these technologies are going to go through over the next 10 years, and you start looking at the conventional power, and you start drawing these curves, and these things are very quickly, without a lot of the subsidies, because a lot of folks say, hey, it is all about there's big, all the tax reform going on, and they think wind and solar and these are being subsidized, which is why, and it's true, today that's why they're in the money. The question is, in 10 years from now, without a lot of subsidies, with the way the costs are coming down, you will see a lot of disruption, and this is where, back to the CEOs and boards, they have figured it out that this is happening. Yep. And this isn't about just protecting the old assets, and I think they're embracing the change, and I think it's going to come. We're not at the tipping point quite yet. The solar penetrations isn't where it needs to, but we would say probably by 2022, 2023 is going to be the inflection point, and by 2030, which is where, when you're building large assets, you're modeling economics. By 2030, we think the power industry will be disrupted.
Okay.
So that's the time frame.
two more questions, and the first is for David, and because I would be, I think, remiss if we were talking about disruption, I didn't ask about the press a little bit. And
What happened?
there's just so
What did I miss?
so much change, right? Tell me a little bit about. I mean, right? Same thing every day, another industry, fake news.
Yeah.
You know,
So much of what my colleagues have said sort of half resonated and made me break out a little sweat about remembering the disruption. So I was in the newspaper business, the news business for 20 plus years, and talk about a business that ended up being turned upside down. And I mean, every industry virtually has been. I lived it in the press business. And one of the things I was reminded of there was the old business guru, Tom Peters. And he said in one book, he said, you know, two things are true about technology-driven change. One is it's going to take a lot longer than you think. The other is it's going to be here before you know it. And I lived that duality because, you know, the newspaper business had some astute people in it, and for going back to the 80s, we were saying, well, the digital, it wasn't called digital then, but in fact the early versions was, believe it or not, we were most fearful about the telephone companies that were going to come in with something called electronic publishing, and there was also, so it was going to be Ameritech or AT&T, and so, but the point is people have been thinking about how are we going to handle this transition in the business for decades. And then part of the time was when nothing seemed to change, and it didn't really happen. And then online sort of started, and AOL came in, and the internet didn't really get underway until the mid '90s. And so we're lulled into the sense that this is going to be a gradual, manageable transition, and then you really do hit these inflection points, and it was in the late '90s when both initially, and the biggest problem was because as you know, the media business is kind of a combination of advertising and subscribers. So the initial biggest impact was more on the advertising side than the user side, the subscriber side, because all of a sudden, where newspapers had been this phenomenal and mostly monopolistic gatekeeper for anybody who wanted to reach a local audience, whether you're selling a house or selling a car or doing a Macy's ad or what have you, you pretty much had to go to the newspaper and then eventually radio and TV. Yep. But the obliteration of that sort of gatekeeper role on the advertising side really crushed the economics of the business. And then what has continued that and accelerated that is the shift on the user side to other platforms, other sources of content. So it's been a huge disruption is the only good word for it. Yep. And the thing that you see, I liken a little bit to the, back maybe decades ago when things were more stable. It was kind of like a redwood forest or sequoia. So you had mostly these giant newspapers and TV companies and not too much growing down around but now a lot of those big trees are knocked down or burned up, and so what you're seeing is driven by technology and innovation, this amazing new ecosystem of all these new entities that are doing, and a lot of it's social media driven. And so the media landscape is in a lot of ways richer and more vibrant, unless you're a newspaper, which is, it's got its real challenges, but there's so many exciting things that are going on that are driven by the technology and innovation and the great thirst for the consumers have for media. The only other thing I'd say, which you were touching on, was it's not only disrupted the business, it's disrupted a lot of culture and politics, and not solely, not just the media changes, but when you think of and you all know these phenomena as well as I do, of the fragmentation which is sort of contributed to and followed how polarized the thing. So there, you can find your own favorite media corner of the world and never hear an interesting idea of any differing viewpoint, and unfortunately people do. And so the disruption of the media has carried over into the civics and politics, and the only further thing I'd say on that is the deliberate assault that you see on and media. Media has its problems like every other sector, but the deliberate assault that you have on the credibility of journalists and reporters and citizen reporters who are actually trying to do a good job, and on most days or many days do a good job. It's a very bad thing for our country to continue to tear down institutions that are decent and trying to hold government accountable, and the deliberate way that's being done at the highest level of the government is just, it's really it's terrible, and we'll all get through it, and but we all need to be vigilant about it in our own ways.
Absolutely. So this is going to be my last question. I know I'm getting the eye over there from my time people, but we're going to get to audience. I think we'll have time for a few questions after from the audience, hopefully. But Rita, we've talked a lot about technology. Ultimately, it's about people, right? We've still got to hopefully they don't take over completely. The machines don't take over completely, right? But how should we think about? You mentioned talent earlier. How are you thinking about that?
Yeah, I have to laugh when you're making the comment about machine learning. I was sitting at our leadership meeting last week in New York. My boss looked at me, he goes, well, in 20 years, we were talking about the 20-year strategy. He goes, when a machine is giving you your review to another machine, but we joke about it. No, talent is at the core of everything. In fact, whether it's here in Chicago, where no one industry makes up more than 12%, so I'm talking to multiple industries, or in the Detroit, I have the Michigan market, a lot of auto, or Indiana or higher with manufacturing. The core of most of my conversations and the top three things the C-suites are talking about is obviously their strategy, their talent, and then under strategy, how to leverage data analytics in this disruptive environment. But when it comes to talent, it's not just, there's almost two extremes that we're seeing. One is around leveraging all this data. So they're looking for engineering, technology, math. And on the other side of the continuum, I was just at a meeting with a council group in Cincinnati, which Ohio's one of my states. They were talking about the lack of skilled labor and attracting skilled labor and the need for a lot of the trades people have gotten out of. And there's actually a shortage of truck drivers. And think of all of whether a technology company like Amazon, well, they've got to get their product there somehow, right? So when I think about talent, it's actually a number one issue. I'm on our Diversity Inclusion Council. I run it for our global commercial bank. And it's more about what you see on the outside. I have to say, from the outside, we look like a very diverse panel. But I think what I'm more proud about is diversity of thought, style, background. I think that's as important. I mean, I hate to just check a box. I always laugh. They're like, oh, you're a female, you're on the Diversity Inclusion Council. And I said, yes, but diversity is about, and this is not my quote, it's a famous woman who talks about diversity and inclusion. Diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance. And at the end of the day, I want everybody to be included. Like I said, when I get up and talk about it, I love white men, right? I'm married to one, my husband's one, my father's one. I don't care about the outside. It's diversity of thought, style, background. And I think that's why, knowing I'm speaking to veterans, a lot of companies, like Bank of America, McDonald's, et cetera, look to hire veterans because their experiences translate so well. And I don't think I appreciated that enough until I saw my own husband, who's in the audience, transfer out of 20 years in Navy Special Warfare and go into the medical fields, leveraging logistics, leveraging strategy, talking about business development, project management. And so many cities like Cincinnati are trying to figure out how to attract veterans to their community because there's so many great skill sets. And so with that, I think there will continue to be a concern about a war on talent. I think it's going to be at both extremities. And as much as we hear about change in technology and artificial intelligence taking over, at the core of that, you're still going to need somebody looking at the data, doing the analytics, understanding the mathematics behind that, and then taking that data and putting a strategy in place. So I think diversity is going to be really important for the millennials. They don't see as much on the outside, I don't believe, as maybe generations prior to them. But it's more than just what kind of benefits do you have, what is your health care. It's about what you do for the community. It's the social governance aspect of it. And I think that's equally as important, and that's why you see so many companies leaning in. It is the right thing to do, but it also is a question that I'm getting as I'm interviewing people. They want to know, what do you do from volunteers, and what type of grants do you give? How are you helping the communities in the south and west side of Chicago? How can I be a part of that? So talent's huge, I believe, from a veteran's perspective. A veteran's perspective, there's a lot that veterans can bring to the market. That's why we've agreed to hire at minimum 10,000 veterans. We've done 700 events this year. But it's not just to check a box. It's because there's value there, and every company is trying to figure out how to harness that. Yep. So I'll end on that note.
That's awesome. Thank you. So this has been great. I'm going to turn it over. I don't know if we can lift the lights a little bit on the audience. And Mitch, help me out. Do we have time for one or maybe two quick ones? How are we doing? Okay, great. A couple quicker ones. So we're going to turn it over to the audience. Does anybody have anything? Hopefully. I'm having trouble seeing with the lights of the audience. So right here in the middle here.
I've got a question for Peter, or you probably best suited to answer. Outcome health, what's going on with that from your perspective? Are they just get caught, or tip of the iceberg type of thing? What's going on from your view?
Well, I like the nice softball. So to be honest with you, for those in the audience who don't know who Outcome Health is, it's a company that had grown bootstrapped and provided information in patient offices throughout the country, one of the fastest growing healthcare companies with a tech foundation. They recently got an investment from Goldman Sachs, Google, Pritzker Group, and a Wall Street Journal article broke and had indicated that there was fraud in how they were reporting their business to their core clients. So to answer the question, I really don't know what specifically is happening there. Clearly they're investigating fraud. Where if the fraud went to the executive level is unknown, and I think you can make snap judgments where there's going to be, I will guarantee you this, plenty of further investigation from the investors, the lawsuits that are going on. I will say this, it is something that I wish did not happen, because they were a $5 billion valued company. They were known from coast to coast, and it puts a little bit of a black eye on Chicago. But I had this conversation this morning. That company can be rebuilt. All you got to get back to is to your integrity, put leadership in that's going to address it, because what they were doing was helping patients improve their lives through better health care. So I think there's a way to recover from it. Certainly not the story that you want to be told, and I clearly have no idea if there was fraud at all levels or if that fraud was just isolated, and I hope that's the case.
Great. Mitch?
I spent my entire career in information technology, and almost every project we did, we justified that project based on head count. We're going to reduce the number of head count to do whatever we were doing in the past. So it seems that technology, as it grows and becomes more and more important, is going to stress the fact that, you know, we're going to be putting some people out of work. We're going to displace people. And you're talking about drivers at one point in time. I understand that that's one of the biggest occupations in the United States when you look at drivers of all types. And driverless cars, trucks, etc. So my concern is there really going to be a great opportunity for people, or is it going to be more displacement and pain in the short run rather than opportunity?
I think there'll be opportunity. Now, I've been called Pollyannish before, but I also believe I'm a realist. Here's why. I see us investing more in technology, and yes, some jobs are displaced, but it's like saying that the people that used to operate the typewriters and coding checks at the bank, what would happen to their jobs? Well, I think that's part of what we're talking about with training and HR, 10%, as I'd said earlier, 12%, they're investing in. How do you reinvest in that workforce? At the end of the day, they're still going to need consumers to utilize these products who are going to need income. So I'm still bullish on the fact that we are going to invest in technology, but there's going to be ways to reinvent themselves. Think of the post office. I think the post office at one point thought, oh, with all this electronic email, we're going to go out of business. Well, now what does the post office do? They're delivering packages that are being ordered on the internet every day, all day. So there will be displacement. There'll be some jobs, in my mind, that'll no longer be needed. But I think those jobs and opportunities are going to creep up in other places. I believe that that's probably what makes us great in North America, the United States. We always reinvent ourselves. Think about Chicago 100 years ago, 50 years ago, 20 years ago. I think about myself in banking. I think that threat breeds opportunity, and that opportunity helps us get stronger. But I'm okay with change. So I'm somebody who's okay with change, so maybe I'm asking the wrong person.
But no, I hope not. But to your point, on both the talent and the change side, it really also requires that we rethink how our education institutions
Absolutely.
doing, how our workforce training is done, because we are in a world where you're going to have to reinvent yourself like a bunch of times, and we aren't near doing the things that we need to make sure people can make the transition. And I think, as a lot of people observed, that was, again, an economic disruption that also disrupts politics, because if we don't do things for the people who are otherwise going to be left behind by the technology change, there's going to be a reckoning.
Yeah. Anjay, I think you touched on it. People that are, my daughter, who I'm in my mid-40s with an 18-month-old, I will be working for 20 more years. But when my daughter comes along...
Or she could be the next Taylor Swift or something.
She does have a set of lungs, I believe. She likes to scream. No, but with that, I think about what you had said. There's programs now about kids who code. And so I think, to your point, I think it has to change from an education. And I believe companies do have a responsibility, and I think that's why we do offer grants and we figure out ways to invest. And corporations are taking it on themselves, do work with public school systems to figure out how to get certain skill sets needed back in the grammar school, not even at the high school level, back even further.
It should be babies who code.
Babies who code. Maybe that'll keep my 18-month-old occupied.
But I will kind of comment to that. I think that the reality of the long-haul truck drivers is the largest profession. And I believe that the long-haul truck driver is the easiest one to replace with autonomous vehicles. It's pretty close to a straight line and probably the best and the most easy way to drive a vehicle. And they probably has the most money to make if they make it autonomous. And so I think we also hear people talking about data. There's more and more data. We got it all over our sensors and everything. There's so much data. There's so much processing. Everything's in the cloud that can be processed. I will argue that machines are a lot better at processing data and turning it into intelligence more than ever. And so what I think is, I do feel just like in the movie Hidden Figures, is it? I think that there has to be a bigger emphasis today. Not that we're going to figure it out later, but we're going to figure this out now, because my view is that we need to start figuring out some solutions so they can be in place. Like I think you said, you have an education, and 60 years later, I think that we need to start thinking about that now, because it is happening now, and I don't think that people are taking it seriously enough to look at how are we changing education, how are we creating new jobs, and I think that there are calls out there. But I think we need more leadership in every aspect, from us being a venture capitalist to government to businesses, because I think some of the changes that you referenced are going to happen. That's my perspective.
So
I've put in one very quick plug for veterans as entrepreneurs, and I hope some of our friends from the Bunker Lab here, Todd Connor and colleagues, started, and there's so much about the entrepreneurial spirit and skills that fits with what veterans bring in the way of talent and energy and passion and commitment. And that'll also, if we flood the zone with veteran entrepreneurs, help solve a lot of these
Absolutely.
issues.
Actually, veterans make great consultants.
Wait, do you notice we're all plugging up here?
Well, with that, that's a great call to action. I'd ask you just join me in thanking our panel. It's really been outstanding.
Thank you.
And at this point, while we're kind of transitioning off here, I'm going to invite Kate Besser up to the stage. Kate is one of our co-presidents, and she's going to talk a bit more about the VLC and then the recognition for John.
Yes. Thank you, Alex, and what a great discussion. It's a tough act to follow. But I will say one matter did not come up, and it's a matter of national importance. And there's an event coming up this Saturday in Philadelphia, and we'll leave the discussion at this. Go Navy, beat Army.
Go Army. Go Army.
Thank you. Always Army heavy. This is a very exciting time for the Veterans Leadership Council. We're approaching the end of our second full year in existence. Our organization has made incredible progress toward becoming the premier professional networking group for veterans in the city of Chicago. And as Alex mentioned, we've grown 40% this year alone, and we now have over 400 members. We're proud to say that these members represent all branches of the military and a variety of ranks. As we continue to gain traction and formalize the structure of the VLC for sustained success, we are introducing a dues structure that will be effective January 1st. Members will have the option to pay in full for the year of membership or pay as they wish to attend events throughout the year. We'll share more details about this in the coming weeks to all of our members. Now I'm here tonight. It is my honor to introduce our Veteran Supporter of the Year Award on behalf of the VLC. A lot of hard work was put into tonight's event, but one part was very easy: selecting the recipients of this award. Many months ago, we discussed the idea of presenting awards to one of the VLC's greatest supporters and advocates, and immediately John Edelman's name came up, and the board unanimously agreed. Mr. Edelman serves as Managing Director of Global Engagement and Corporate Responsibility at Edelman, a leading global communications marketing firm. In his role, Mr. Edelman has been particularly supportive of veterans' causes, a way to continue to honor his father, Dan Edelman, who was drafted into the Army in 1942 and assigned to the 5th Mobile Radio Broadcasting Company, a psychological warfare unit. His job was to analyze German propaganda, providing information that was used by the Allies to counter with messages of their own. After the war, he went on to found Edelman, and the rest is history. John Edelman was one of the first sponsors of Bunker Labs and the Veterans Leadership Council. In fact, he hosted the 3rd ever VLC meeting back when we were still called the Council of 100. Not only did Edelman host that meeting, Mr. Edelman arranged for subject matter experts from Edelman to join us and lead exercises which facilitated the development of the vision of the VLC. The output from those sessions catalyzed the growth that has made the VLC what it is today. Edelman also produced our first ever marketing video and continues to be a constant support of guidance and support. Mr. Edelman was an instrumental early supporter to both Bunker Labs and the VLC, and without his leadership and expertise, we would likely not have found our voice. As many of our members know, he continues to attend our events regularly, from quarterly meetings to small group meals. The VLC is extremely fortunate to have Mr. Edelman as a leader, a supporter, and a friend, and we are proud to present this award to him today.
Wow. Leadership, leadership. Here it is, here and now. So I'm really honored and proud to be honored in this way. Distinguished guests, family, and friends, I'm really honored and humbled to be recognized as the Veteran Leadership Council's Veteran Supporter of the Year. On this Pearl Harbor Day, I first want to thank our veterans who selflessly serve our country today or have served, as our fellow veterans did, 76 years ago at Pearl Harbor. To the millions of veterans and service members around the globe and here tonight, thank you. While you represent just 1% of the U.S. population, you keep us safe. And we enjoy the liberties and opportunities of our country. Your dedication, devotion and commitment to service and country inspires me to do what I can personally and professionally do to support veteran initiatives which benefit veterans and their families. I also wish to thank many of you attending tonight who helped me better understand the veteran environment and experience. Your mentorship, guidance, and support helped me become the veteran advocate I am today. Pearl Harbor impacted my life and the lives of my brother and sister, even though we weren't even born yet. The day of infamy inspired my father, Dan Edelman, to join the Army. He was eager to join his brothers, Albert and Morton, who already were serving. Right after Pearl Harbor, my father applied, but was rejected by the Army and Navy for bad nearsightedness. But 12 months later, he reapplied and again became immediately available. After World War II, my father used the skills, knowledge, and experience he gained in the Army to establish Edelman in 1952. Today, it is the leading communications and marketing firm operating globally. One of my passions is helping change the conversation about veteran hiring. To that end, we undertake the annual Veteran Wellbeing Survey of 3,000 plus non-veterans, veterans, employers, and community partners. This year's survey highlights some of the misperceptions about veterans in the workplace. According to the survey, 76% of employers say they want to hire more veterans, but over half, 52%, contend to struggle they find veteran applicants, particularly with the skills and experience they seek. Well, you've heard it earlier in today's panel from Bank of America and other people on the panel. What I'd say, based on my experience at Edelman, and since experience is the best teacher, I would say to all employers, hire veterans. The veterans we employ at Edelman are making a positive contribution to our business. My work on behalf of veterans also honors the legacy of my mother, Ruth Edelman. Despite having bipolar disorder, she lived a productive life as a loving mother and grandmother, life partner of my dad, mental health advocate, and civic leader. She successfully lobbied on Capitol Hill in the 1990s for additional funding for mental health, an issue which touches all of us today. In our Edelman 217 survey, we asked participants how many had experienced a mental health challenge in the past year. Similar to our findings last year, 1 in 2 employers, 1 in 2 veterans, and 1 in 3 non-veterans said they had experienced a mental health challenge in the previous 12 months. Obviously, we have much work to do to change these misperceptions about veterans. I congratulate the Veterans Leadership Council and all the other employers and partners here tonight working together to address these issues. In closing, I truly am honored to receive this award. How rewarding to be recognized for being able to combine my personal and professional experience, honor the legacy of my dad and mom, work with veterans who I respect and know are civic leaders, and make a positive impact on an important societal issue. Over the Thanksgiving holiday, I had the opportunity to visit the Smithsonian National Museum of American History's Price of Freedom, Americans at War exhibit. Walking through the exhibit, I was inspired by the service and sacrifice of our military through the generations. I also saw this quote from Thomas Paine from his first American Crisis pamphlet from December 1776. He wrote, "These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will in this crisis shrink from the service of their country, but he that stands it now deserve the love and thanks of man and woman." This quote resonated with me and reinforced my advocacy for veterans. As in Thomas Paine's time, this quote provides a call to action for all of us. As the military, communities, and individuals came together to defeat the British, We need to collaborate to change the misperceptions and misunderstandings contributing to a present-day military-civilian divide. Based on your selecting me for this recognition, I'm a living example that progress can be made to bridge this divide. I did not serve in the military, but veterans in Chicago and around the country have welcomed me into the veteran space. I became engaged and passionate about veterans issues, which has led to our further company engagement. Our commitment has led to information sharing with other companies. Several companies, leaders, and VSOs coming together at events like this leads to more company involvement. More company participation results in deeper community engagement. Broader community participation evolves to meaningful conversation and positive change, which is why we are all here tonight. Thanks again for this honor, and I look forward to working with everybody to meet this challenge. Thank you.
Thank you, John, so much. Thank you, John. I will just say, you know, when we were initially planning this event, it was and started talking about an award and who to recognize, it was an absolute no-brainer, thanks to all your service and obviously how passionate you are on this issue. I now want to just take a moment to introduce Megan Everett and Tim Melham to the stage. They're going to recognize a few members of our leadership team. Tim, Megan.
Thanks, Alex. Bear with us a couple more minutes here. Essentially, on behalf of the board, Meg and I are up here because we want to commence a tradition where upon the board of directors are going to honor a couple of VLC members who have contributed significantly over the past year to the organization. We're going to do a little Oscars back and forth here, too. So just bear with me.
The most difficult part of coming up with these awards is that there's so many members that have stepped up this year selflessly, distinguishing themselves by contributing to the VLC's growth as an organization, that we could have literally given dozens of awards. However, rather than have an award parade, we decided to focus on giving out two very specific high-level awards this year, the VLC Veteran Leadership Award and the VLC Veteran Impact Award.
So the first award, the VLC Veteran Leadership Award, I'm just going to read the official language that the board adopted. That's to recognize a member who has demonstrated a superior level of leadership and unrelenting initiative and commitment to the VLC. The recipient exhibits exemplary command presence and management of VLC members. The recipient went above and beyond what was expected in support of the VLC's mission, providing an authentic and relevant leadership voice for veteran professionals and serving as a thought leader for the advancement of the VLC and veterans. So obviously, in the organization, there's a lot of leaders, and this award probably could have went to a number of people, but one woman in particular stood out above the rest. She's been involved in the leadership of the VLC since the beginning, and she was elected co-president this past year, and numerous members have come up to the board, or at least among us, and voiced how exemplary her leadership has been, how reliable she's been and responsive, and from the board's perspective, we have to agree. The VLC's made great strides this year, and that's due in no small part to having her steady hand on the leadership on the rails here. So therefore, this first annual VLC Veteran Leadership Award goes to Kate Besser. Let's give her a hand.
The second award, the VLC Impact Award, is being awarded, again, in the board's official language, to the VLC member who demonstrated a bias for action and whose visionary efforts provided a clear, tangible, and substantial improvement to the VLC and the greater veteran community at large. The recipient is a trailblazer who's unafraid to speak their mind and to seek out and champion changes to improve the VLC. The recipient worked to provide relevant and purposeful engagement opportunities for veterans in business and government and embodies the VLC motto that the veterans are assets to their companies and not a population that is perpetually in need. Again, so many people are deserving of this award, but the board came to a conclusion that there's no doubt that the recipient embodies this description. Since Breg has taken the helm, I had to throw a Navy reference in there, of the VLC, he has taken a startup organization meant for professional veterans and actually professionalized it. His vision and leadership of an all-volunteer team has been an inspiration to watch. Not only is he a great leader, but he's always willing to lend a helping hand to a fellow veteran. It's my honor to award the VLC Veteran Impact Award to Breg Hughes.
All right, so we're about done. But before we go, I want to emphasize that none of what the VLC has been able to accomplish this year would have been done. We wouldn't have been able to do any of it without the help of the entire leadership team. So I just want to quickly recognize each of those individuals and have them stand where you are so you guys can see everybody that was involved in this event. So Alex, who you met already tonight, and Mitch Zerbicki, they headed up programming for the year, so they were responsible for planning events and really making sure the execution was top-notch. Jim Flanagan was Director of Finance. Kirby Atwell handled membership. He's at a board meeting in San Antonio today. And then finally, Brendan O'Brien and Angel Torres were co-leads of communication. So none of what we've been able to accomplish would have been possible without this leadership team. So please give them a round of applause. And then one last thank you to Miller Coors for donating 980 beers. So we've probably gone through about a quarter of that. So with that, there's pizza and beer outside, and thanks again for coming.